We have our shot 10 all rendered and good to go, and we have a great setup for it. We are within the shot 10 script, as you can see. What I'm going to do is save that with a new name. I'm going to save that as shot 20. Now, as I've practiced this, there'll already be one, but I'm just going to save over it because I don't care. Now, you would never do that in production. I'm going to make this full screen again. We're going to go to the top. Now, as you may have noticed throughout this course, I have been very particular about naming all my layers in a specific way, keeping the naming consistent. And now we're going to see how that pays off. Because if I take my render and I bring in my new render, so I've got my shot 10 render in there. And if I go to my images folder, you can see that we have similar names for shot 10 and shot 20. Now I've used version numbers and then I've used these little letters. Now sometimes I'll use these letters, sometimes an underscore and a second number. The letters and numbers are where I've simply tweaked the render settings, but I haven't actually changed the contents of the scene. A new version is where I have made some kind of change. So I've actually used a version for each module in this case, but in production, it may be, that if you were to move the whiskey bottle on the table as part of the creative brief, that would be a new version. If you were to adjust the render setting to increase the number of samples and so forth, that would be a subversion using a letter or underscore and a second number. However, you may notice that I have almost exactly the same names for everything in shot 10 and shot 20. And this is great because now I'm going to take my master layer from shot 10 and I'm going to swap it for the master layer in shot 20. So there's master layer there, there's master layer there, and I'm going to swap it. So to swap it, I select it, hold down Control and Shift, drag it on top, and it will swap the node out. And that node is now gone. I can delete it. And if I look down, you can see that my diffuse is already working exactly as it did in the other scene. I've got exactly the same thing going on, and that's all working. Now, of course, here I've got my utilities, so they need to line up as well. I can also just simply replace them within the read node by redirecting to the correct path. So let's find our utility layer for shot 20. There it is, utility shot 20, open. There we are. So we need to also do the same with our ambient occlusion and our fog. But if I go to the right down here, you can see that all my back to beauty and relighting is still working. Nothing has been broken by the change in renders. So all of this stuff is doing exactly the same thing. Now I probably want to retime my lights because in this shot I actually want the light to begin switched on for continuity. So I'm going to delete the key there. And in this multiply, what I want to do is go a couple of frames. Let's delete that key. Go to the end of the move at frame 20, and then I'm going to set a key. So I've actually made the comp slightly longer than this 3D render. That's fine because I've got some movement that happens on the static frame. And then I've gone to 0. So the light, we have the whole move with the light switched on, and then we switch the light off as we move out of the shot. So that's all working. Now ambient occlusion, exactly the same thing. Remember, we can either open the read node and reconnect the path, or we can create a new read node and swap it out. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to do both on the shots. So let's get our ambient occlusion for shot 20. There's that. And let's swap it out. So start dragging and hold down Control and Shift. Start dragging, hold down Control and Shift. Delete shot 10. So now our ambient occlusion is working as well. So all we've done is just change the camera, but we've kept everything the same and we've kept the same names. So this entire comp still works, even my Cryptomats. So I've got a Cryptomat here that fixes the problem with the wire. Even our Cryptomat is still working even though we've swapped the renders out. So this is great. Because everything's more or less procedural, we don't have to do a lot of work to get a new shot up and running. Now in this case we're just swapping the camera, so it should be easy, but you know, it may be more difficult in other situations. Now here we have our ref scene. Now of course we're viewing it through the wrong Alembic camera, so we can open the camera, and in the file node we can redirect this path from our cam 10 camera to our cam 20.abc. Yes, we do. And now those cards are still kind of in the right place. We may need to adjust them, but they're more or less where they need to be. And our fog, again, I'm going to reconnect the path, double click on the read node, and find the path to our fog for shot 20. And that's there. So again, the fog is there, it gets cranked up, multiplied by the cards, and you can sort of see that there. Now you can already see our cards aren't quite in the right position, so as we're looking from a different angle, we've reached the top of the cards. So I'm just going to bring them up a little bit. Actually, and bring this one up, and bring this one up. There we are. So we've got this lovely card effect still working, so we've got it moving again in the correct parallax. So again, our smoking gun, we're going to need to do the same thing. We reload our Alembic and add our cam from shot 20. Yes, we do. We want to overwrite the data, and now we will check where we are in our check scene, our reference scene, and we can see that the card's kind of in the right place over the gun, but that doesn't mean the smoke element will be exactly where we want it. So we'll look at the result of that, and we'll check where our smoke is, and it seems okay there. Let's go to the end of the move, and it's kind of a bit wrong perhaps, so let's just move it, shunt it a little bit along that way and bring it up a little bit, and because we're looking down on it, let's just rotate it a bit within the X, and there we are. So we have the smoke sort of coming out of what would be the end of the gun, going behind the bottle here, and at the end of the move it's still in the correct position. So again, that card is moving with the camera. Now we have our lens effect. Now it would be a different lens, but in this case I'm just going to use the same one. So I've got the same lens distortion, the same everything. I've done the same trick with the grade. Now we will need to set our defocus up, so I'm going to open the Z defocus node, go to the focal plane setup and view it. Okay, so obviously our depth of field is completely wrong in this instance. What I need to do is get to the end of our move, decide that we want to focus perhaps on the whiskey that's been spilled, and then at the beginning of the move we want to be focused on the gun. So we'll bring this focal point to here. So this is really just our iPhone picker. The actual focus plane values are over here. So when we look at the result, and again we have some of the smoke in focus, so that grade of the depth has kind of worked. We can tweak it a little bit more, so we can just use this multiply and get more of the smoke in focus. Perhaps we need to be a bit more subtle. There we are, and we can see that at the end the smoke is also staying in focus, not all of it, which is what we want. We want some smoke in focus, some smoke not in focus. Now I actually think that because this is a wider lens, the depth of field shouldn't be as narrow as on the other lens. The other lens was an 80mm, so I'm actually going to increase the depth of field a little bit, so it makes it a little bit bigger. I'm going to decrease the amount of defocus, and I'm also going to decrease the maximum. Now, since we've done it on 2 shots, I want to show you this bokeh, which we also use on shot 10. I have used a reformat node to make it 50 pixels by 50 pixels. You could use a real bokeh, by the way. I've got some noise, and I've got a roto shape which is almost a hexagon, but I've deliberately made it not quite perfect. Multiply the two together and we get this. I've used an edge detect and then blurred that and screened that on top, so I turn the overlay off, this kind of bokeh with a bit of noise in the middle and then edge, and then I've shuffled that into all the channels, the RGB channels, so they're now all the same, and that gets plugged into my ZD Focus. And so instead of using bladed or disk, it uses image, it uses the bokeh that I've created for things that get out of focus. So if I really crank this up to something silly, you will see those shapes appearing within the bokeh. So I'm going to put that back to something sensible, put our vector blower on, and now we're good to render. Because we stayed organized and we stayed consistent in our naming, we've been able to comp this second shot within 10 minutes, whereas the first shot took quite a bit longer to comp. I hope that has given you some idea of why naming matters and why it's actually important to enable you to be creative and fast. So let's move on. Let's look at creating toolsets that you can reuse and workflows within V-Ray that will empower your compositing as well.